The Beach FM Business Lunch Show, brought to you by PlaceMakers Kapiti and Horowhenua. Together we're building New Zealand.
Welcome back to the Business Lunch Show on Beach FM 106.3, and let's talk events now. Let's talk business. Let's mix them together, and let's introduce Helene Judge from Kapiti Business Projects and the Kapiti Food Fair. G'day, Helene.
Hi, Damian. Thank you.
How are you doing at this time?
Oh, pretty good. A bit like everybody, probably. It's a pretty odd time in our lives, isn't it? 2020 is definitely going to be a year that, no one will ever forget.
No.
And I think there's still quite a lot of water, to run under the bridge still.
We do have a long way ahead of us. But how did you get through COVID? Do you pull up all right?
Yes, I think so. It's, sometimes I go to bed each night and I think, gosh, I'm glad that day's over, and I'm going to sleep that one off and get up refreshed tomorrow to go again. And to be quite frank, it's I wanted to have a little bit more of a rest than what I did, because what I found was things sort of revved up a bit, because it was really around thinking, oh my gosh, this is pretty crazy. And lots of threads of work that were happening were no longer happening. And what was I going to do? And so it was a bit, spending the time trying to reinvent quite a lot of activities that I'm involved in from a business perspective. And then also, just being home with my son and, being a mum as well, and working that through, and then also sort of trying to, at a distance, take care of my own mum, who lives here locally as well, but she wasn't in our bubble. So we sort of needed to be really aware of her and what was happening for her as well. So probably my story is not, probably very similar to many, many people's stories. And it's still even quite odd now in level 2, because I'm quite well used to, being a sole trader. I work, my HQ is at home. So I'm sort of quite used to working at home and working in my own bubble. However, it was different, because you couldn't sort of just randomly, have those meetings with people, and you had to sort of start doing it all in another way. And, thankfully for things like Zoom, which most of us are sort of reasonably familiar with, but it became like the centre of our being, and it still is to a certain extent. It's just sort of opened up lots of other doors, and hopefully people can use what's come out of this, and maybe some of these new tools, particularly digital tools, if you haven't been using them, that people can maybe start bringing them in and integrating them in, for the months and the weeks ahead, and maybe forever.
Yeah, a lot of us have had to change and adapt during this time. But let's just hear a bit about your story. You do, you have the Kapiti Business Projects, but you're also the Kapiti Food Fair. So, how did you come about, and a bit about yourself leading up to starting Kapiti Food Fair?
Okay, so Kapiti Food Fair has been around for a long time, but maybe I'll just touch on Kapiti Business Projects first, because that came into being back in 2012.
Cool.
And I've been in Kapiti for about 13 years, and I know that because that's how old my son is, and I came when he was born. And way back then, I was working for an organisation called Nature Coast Enterprise, which doesn't actually exist anymore, but I was a business development manager there. And when that folded up, and that was because the two major funders, being Horowhenua District Council and Kapiti Coast District Council, they decided to do economic development and delivery of the eyesight. We had an eyesight back then, but they decided to do it differently. And so the organisation was disbanded, and that's really when my business got set up, because it was like, gosh, I don't want to go back to Wellington and work for anybody else. And I think I have quite a lot of contacts, and I quite like it. It just sort of evolved, like going into business and doing my own thing. It was a magic moment, and it was like, gosh, I'm going to just take that up and run with it. And since then, I'm never going to be a millionaire. However, I've been able to integrate into a really amazing place to live, work and play, and, put food on the table, which is pretty cool. So the actual business of Kapiti Business Projects is a little bit, it can be very varied, and that's one of the reasons I love it, because it's like being a business development manager, but it's a contractor. So I do a lot of, I do some ongoing work for clients, but I also have, I like doing projects, one-off things that happen that people need, but they don't have the time to put the tools down to do stuff. So I do it for them, and I do it from my own office at home. And charge them for it, which is pretty cool. And then sort of falling out of that, though, way back in the days of Nature Coast Enterprise, we were very interested in the food industry. Yeah. And so we had developed a database, and we knew that Kapiti is an interesting space. There's a lot of really amazing food producers out there. And so I sort of started having an interest in that industry, way back then. And when the Kapiti Food Fair was first created in 2008, I wasn't initially there at inception. So Janine Van Kruidenberg, who's now my business partner, she was involved, and it actually got established out of the old Whiti Raya site. And it was sort of a very, and there was a guy called Tony Garn who was also one of the inaugural people, and they pulled it together. It was very much a community-based event, and it was quite small and quite home-baked, but obviously it's grown, obviously quite significantly since then. But it was in those early stages that they came up to Nature Coast Enterprise, and they started chatting to me, and it just has a lot of things in life. It just sort of evolved, and it became quite big quite quickly. But then as soon as we moved it away from the Lindale site, where you guys are actually now, and we moved it down to the Maisengard Reserve in 2014, that's when things really sort of started to take shape and also put it more onto a business footing, and there was a private partnership that was formed, and we started developing it, and then in 2016 it sort of took a big giant step of growth forward, because we applied to the Kapiti Major Events Fund, and we got funding approved for a 3-year period. And so that really, really helped us. All that funding went into our marketing program, and it helped to sort of position ourselves, get ourselves on the map, and make the event. It moved it from being just a local community-based event to a major event where there are lots of visitors, coming in. So we're really grateful for that Major Events Fund, because it certainly, helped propel us. We were sustainable before we got it, but we were sustainable in a smaller way, whereas we were able to grow a little bit more quickly. And what's really neat is that I always remember telling them in the beginning, the council meeting that we had to go to, that we really felt that we didn't want to see funding for just 3 years. We really wanted to position it and try and seek funding for a 5-year period. But they initially approved it for 3, but we got the invitation last year to do another pitch, and so we did that, and we've essentially ended up with another 3 years of funding. And so all up, it will be 6 years. So it's actually exceeded a little bit of our expectation at this point, and we're definitely on track with all of the objectives and sort of where we wanted to be, at this point, which is, that's super cool.
Brilliant stuff. So a life of project management. So you take on those projects, and you've turned it into with a passion of food and fair. So at this time where events are getting cancelled, weddings are getting cancelled left, right and centre, how does something like the food fair come out from this? Have you started the feelers for the next one? How's the confidence of people coming back to the event?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, Damian, because it's been a pretty scary time. But what we did when we went into lockdown, Janine and I talked, and we decided that we would, because at the time of lockdown is normally about the time we open up for vendor registration, and we really kick things off behind the scenes. we decided to just wait for a while because we just felt that people weren't ready to be thinking about that at the moment. They really needed to concentrate on their own families and what was going on for them during lockdown. So we pulled back. However, once we started getting into level 3 and we got to level 2, we were sort of revising our plan, behind the scenes. But we got to a point where we knew that the Kapiti Food Fair can only comfortably run once we know that we're in level 1. However, we know that we're on a path to get to level 1, and at the moment we believe that it's going to be well in time to be able to operate the fair. Like events like ours, you do need a massive lead in time. Essentially you do work on an event like this for 12 months of the year. It sort of never stops and goes away. But we made a decision to open up for vendor registration last week, and we actually sent out our first campaign, and oh my gosh, we've been overwhelmed with bookings. We've had over 50 bookings, and I'm not quite sure how that equates into sites yet, because to the point where it's too many for just us to, look at and deal with. We actually contract a couple of other people to help us run the fair, and we've since put that relationship back in place just a couple of days ago. So one of them in particular is now going through all of those bookings and, going through the process of confirming them. But one of the things that we said to all of our vendors was that we know that financially things are still very uncertain, but we know as vendors that, you've had often there's been no place, there's no avenue for you to sell at the moment, because a lot of these people, they travel from event to event, selling their wares. And a lot of them also have an online presence as well. However, the online presence is not necessarily enough, to keep them sustainable. So they're all hanging out for events like ours to start up again. So it's sort of no surprise that we've had this number of bookings come in, but also what we said to them, even though we're a privately owned and run event, and it makes us quite nervous doing this, but we've said to them, we're going to book your site, we're going to send you an invoice, but you don't have to pay it until the 1st of July. And we think that's quite helpful for people, even though it puts us in a slightly more vulnerable position because there's not a lot of cash flow. But we think by 1 July we should, we might even be in level 1 by then, who knows. But, we're on the right path and we feel confident to be, pushing ahead. But also having said that, we know that the event is going to be a little bit different because the unknown factor at the moment will be the willingness of visitors to want to come back in large numbers to a mass event. The good thing with us is that we are an outdoor event and we're on grass and we've got that ability to be able to spread out. But when you get sort of 20,000 plus people in a place like the fair, it's still not, and we traditionally try and sort of make the footprint of the fair quite small because you like it to be sort of cosy and for people to be, close to others because it's a social event as well. And there's 2 stages and there's music and there's lots of things to entertain people and to, an environment where people can come along and have fun and meet people that, maybe they haven't seen for a while, but also they can do it all over having a drink and they can have some food and they can shop to their heart's content. It's a great day out. It's a real destination in itself. So it'll be quite telling as to, we're hoping, obviously, that by December that people will be well and truly to come back and will be ready to have some fun and to, they'll come back in, big numbers. But also through all of that, we're planning to do things a little bit differently because we tend to have been an event in the past where the entry is quite a small entry fee, and it's usually, we do have EFTPOS, but it's usually cash at the gate. And so this year we're going to set in place an arrangement where people can pre-purchase a ticket online. And then what that means is that we also have to put more pressure on our vendors to to be able to do EFTPOS sales for people, or Google Pay or Apple Pay, just pay in other ways so that there's potentially less cash. And like we always have our own ATM machine, but a lot of that cash is all from our own cash, but also from cash that gets recycled in through the gate. So it's all going to be a bit different, but we think it's pretty positive. We know that about 70 to 75% of our vendors do have electronic sales, so we'll be just pushing them to set that up a notch again, so that we can be an event that it won't be totally cashless, but it will be one where people can feel that they don't have to handle cash as such. And we'll obviously do things like put, sanitising stations in. We'll have, we'll bring in the big toilet facilities on the big trucks and things, so that all of that is just another level of sophistication to what we normally have. Obviously, we need to try and make some money so that we can plan for all of that and pay for it. So that's our challenge as owners, to be able to do that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, lastly, Helene, thank you so much for sharing all this. But lastly, where can the people find you? How can they get in touch?
They just need to go and Google the Kapiti Food Fair, or they can Google Kapiti Business Projects, and they'll find me and how to get hold of me. So I'm always delighted to chat with all sorts of people that do often call, but the door's open, and if I'm just sort of putting my Kapiti Food Fair hat on, we can't wait to be able to deliver a game and for people to come along and have a great day out.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your time today, and go well over the next few weeks and the next new normal. All the best with everything. We'll catch up soon as we get closer to having more events, and especially the Kapiti Food Fair.
That's great. Oh, thanks so much, Damian. Thanks for calling.